To order, and we are now meeting as Committee of the Whole. And before we proceed into any of our departments, I would ask at this time if anyone wishes to make. Oh, I'm sorry, we got to do that first. Let's go with the Clerk Spencer. Call the roll first, and we'll get the other people as they filter in.
Hezza.
Here.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Dunn.
Done.
He's absent.
Say here.
Well, they could be absent.
All right.
All right, I'll count him. Bram.
Here.
Kolumsky.
Here.
Here.
Not yet. York.
Here.
Hipskin.
Your voice is changing.
He's absent. Healy's absent. Levin.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
All right, we have a quorum, and we've had a little bit of a break here after a lengthy city council meeting, and welcome back all. Before we proceed to our business at hand, is there anyone that wants to make public comment? All right, regarding this topic. All right, being none, I'm going to turn over to City Manager Grabowski to take the lead on our budget proceedings.
Thank you. We rearranged the agenda a little bit from where we left off last time, and with the short evening tonight that we anticipate, I would ask that we do go right to the library and the museum, as they have members of their boards here.
And I think that's all we will do tonight, correct?
If that's what the council desires, that's all we'll do.
Let's see how it goes, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
That's what the council desires. All right.
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye. All right. Take us to a page, and we're ready to go.
That'd be page 186 through 208 for the library funds.
Okay.
All right. You want to
Go ahead.
go ahead, introduce
Okay.
yourself, and
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight to review the library's budget. I'm Sue Sadowski, President of the Library Board, and I'd like to introduce our one trustee who's hanging in back there, Marcia Baker. And besides me is Mary Beth Camp, our library director, who you met
Welcome.
last year. It's been another record year for the library. Approximately 437,927 visitors have been welcomed to the library in the last 9 months. That's an increase of 5% over last year. 1.1 million items have been checked out, making Elmhurst one of the busiest libraries in per capita usage in the state of Illinois. The library was named one of the top 100 workplaces in Illinois in the category of small companies, and the library also received a 4-star rating again according to the library's journal list of best libraries in the country. Public libraries are always changing to meet the needs of their communities. While this change remains constant, we are currently seeing dynamic shifts in the way that public libraries are positioning themselves to stay relevant to the community with the growth of digital media. Library professionals are watching, listening, and communicating with their patrons and peers to make exciting decisions about the future of the library. What we are seeing in the library community is a greater emphasis being placed on libraries as a community meeting space, collaborative workspace, and a creative outlet space. With this in mind, the Board of Trustees and the library staff are planning changes that will bring the Elmhurst Public Library into the next decade so that we remain a valuable resource to the community. The Library Board approved changes to the meeting room policy that encourages Elmhurst businesses to use our library for their meetings. These changes have resulted in a 31% increase in meeting room usage by the community groups and different businesses. We will be outfitting the meeting rooms with new audio-visual equipment that will provide interactive technology for presentations and high-quality video conferencing. It's hard to believe that our building is 10 years old and the AV equipment is just about obsolete. Think of our old VHS machines and our cassette players, and that was high-tech 10 years ago. We are confident that these improvements will give our residents and businesses a high-quality space equipped with cutting-edge technology where they can meet. We are also exploring adding a media lab Media labs are spaces that have creative software and commercial quality audio and video recording technology. Patrons can create presentations, record music, and make videos in these labs. Many libraries in the Chicago area already have these labs, and they are extremely popular with their communities. There is no place else in the community where residents of all ages can go to produce and create content using state-of-the-art technology. We plan to be that place in Elmhurst. The board also voted to purchase a new and improved library catalog system. We will be upgrading the current system, giving patrons faster searching capabilities, access to broader partner library collections, and more customization. The amount of items we are sending to other libraries will be greatly reduced, meaning that Elmhurst items will stay in Elmhurst. With all of these changes on the horizon, I need to also mention that there will be some things that will remain the same. We remain focused on creating a collection filled with items that our community requests, providing the community with books, DVDs, music CDs, audiobooks, magazines, and other popular materials will continue to be a major part of the library. Providing programs for both children and adults on a multitude of topics will also continue to be one of the fundamental parts of our mission. Summer reading, opera lectures, foreign language clubs, book clubs will all be presented along with a host of other programs that are of interest to the community. And we've left the latest issue of Fine Print up on the dais for all of you to look at, which highlights quite a view of the new programs that will be offered this spring. We are excited about the future of the public library, and we look forward to improving upon the great library that we already have, but we want to continue on with many of our traditions. Our goal is always to provide a community resource where Elmhurst residents can continue to explore, learn, and grow. Before you tonight, you have our budget, which includes not only our operating expenses, but also the funds needed for repayment of our building bonds. Our levy, which you approved last November, includes a 1.5% increase. Of that 1.5%, 0.5% is for the increase to the bond repayment. The other 1% is for the operating fund. We are confident by maintaining a fiscally solvent organization, we can serve Elmhurst residents with even greater levels of service than they have come to expect. Some of our major budget lines have changed. Our full-time and part-time lines have increased because we have added hours to some part-time positions. We also hired in-house IT staff. We shifted money away from our professional services line into the full-time line salary line to create the IT positions. You will also see that there is no longer any money in the overtime line. We are an organization that is open 7 days a week, and like many other entities that provide service, weekend days are just like any other day. Thank you for helping make the library such a successful resource for our community. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank the acting mayor, City Council, as well as the city manager and the rest of the city staff who help us on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, AV, I think I still have my AV card, so glad to hear that term. Any questions from the council, comments? Alderman Bram?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of comments before I get to my one and only question. One, the comments being that obviously the library, it seems like just yesterday that the library opened. I know that ever since the, I'll call it inception or the building of the new library, which is not new anymore, great attendance, and we keep that tradition going on year to year. So kudos to you two, as well as the full library board, present as well as past, and as well as the future. One of the comments I want to take the opportunity, sometimes, you know, you do a public service announcement here. A resident was here about earlier tonight commenting about what video games are offered at the library and what should and should not be offered. My PSA on that statement is it is not up to this elected body to make those decisions. There is an appointed library board that I'm sure was here at that point in time and will take that under consideration. I'm sure they've heard about it before this evening as well. My one question is in regards to, on page 187, the revenues and expenditures sheet. as we all know, the 2013 proposed budget year is a shortened cycle, three-quarters cycle, but the total revenues, it's showing a full property tax revenue of a little bit over 7 million, which if you continue to look down, you're showing an excess revenues over expenditures of 3 million compared to previous years, somewhere give or take 1.2, 1.4 million. So is there a reason why that there's the full property tax revenue showing here and it's not showing any differential between the subsequent year or the previous year to give you a greater overall excess revenue over expenditures line item of 3 million and plus?
I think what you're showing is the bottom line here is the $3 million. And some of that money will be carried into the next fiscal year. Am I answering your question?
No, I guess the question itself is really about the property tax line item. I know we never collect three-quarters of
Right,
property taxes, but I would suspect that it would have either shown in the previous year more so or the subsequent year. I'm not sure why we're showing the full amount, even though it's a shortened budget cycle.
You're looking at the proposed budget column.
Correct.
Because we will collect that most all of it will be collected, if I'm correct, in this cycle, this current 2013 year. So then it won't all be spent this year since it's only an 8-month budget.
Is that what it is?
And that is correct, as Mary Beth described it. And you will see that in the city's
Right.
budget also, that the tax levy was not prorated because the cash is going to be received in those 8 months, but there are expenses that are going to happen. In some areas, expenses that will occur during the 8 months that will be greater than just 2/3 of the year. You really need that tax levy money to come in for cash flow purposes. It is more dramatic in the case of the library because most of their revenue comes
Right.
from the
Right.
tax
Property
levy.
taxes, right.
So Mary Beth is correct that in their budget, more of that money is going to flow through to the next year and pay for the expenses that year.
It's because of the way the tax payments are coming in, the timing for those two payments.
Agreed. The reason why I'm confused about it, because of the shortened budget cycle, it seems like there is a large, almost twice, amount of fund balance going from the 12-13 year to the proposed shortened budget year of 2013. So it went from 1.5 million plus to over 3.1. And if that was the case, I would have expected it to drop significantly the next year, but it stays at that level. So I don't know why a shortened budget cycle would double your fund balance in 1 year.
Well, it will just because of the way those dollars come in. The ones that are not spent, and maybe Alderman Gutenkopf can put it more in lay terms than what I am able to, if you'd like to
Very
speak.
good. Alderman Gutenkopf?
I think I understand the question a little differently. So if I may, Alderman Bram, I think his question is that between 2012 fiscal year and the 2014 fiscal year, you're showing a roughly similar excess of revenues over expenditures. But given that the 2013 fiscal year is only 8 months, I think the expectation would be that the 2014 excess would be less by the amount that 2013 is high, rather than looking at them being roughly similar. Is that what you're getting at, Alderman Bram?
Exactly.
Okay.
Very well said. Thanks for translating.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying, and I believe that when we get to 2014, the board obviously hasn't levied for this yet, that will be reduced. This is just an estimate right now, and definitely a lot, not a lot, probably about 1.5 million from this budget year of 2013 will carry over into next budget year. That will definitely adjust what goes forward from there. Just that we're not, this whole next 8-month cycle is going to be a strange cycle for all of us, so.
That might be something we want to clarify before we put it in final, just because we are proceeding on a 2-year budget. Are we saying saying the same thing?
Yes.
Because it looks like we're collecting more than we're really going to collect over the 3-year budget cycle.
Well, right, and 2014 is only an estimate at this point. So,
Right.
right,
And the council is not approving the 2014
Right.
budget.
yeah.
I
That's
think-
just the
But
second.
if we know it's a little higher than what we think it's going to be by $1.5 million, maybe, that we ought to,
Well, and that's a rough estimate of what, yeah.
You know, we could do that, Mayor Levin, but when we start next year, we can start from our 2014 estimate, but that will just be a starting point. If we said, okay, let's change this number tonight, it's not the number that the council is going to be voting on.
Right.
So,
And I think I understand what you're saying, that it looks funny, and it does, definitely. This 2014, though, is just an estimate. The 2013 number, we are going to collect almost all of our taxes by July, correct?
September.
September, July, but most of ours come in really early, so then I'll have them all. We won't be spending them all by January in any way, shape, or form. So there'll be money that we're carrying over into the next budget cycle. I'm not exactly sure how much. In my head, I have a figure right now, and we can kind of predict out as much as we can. But once we start really getting into budgeting, which will probably, as you know, start happening almost right away again, we'll have a better idea. And these are just really estimates, for sure. I mean, rough estimates at this point.
Alderman York?
Thank you, Your Honor. A question on page 189, the replacement taxes were, and I'm going to refer to the budget this year of $198,000, but we're estimating 120. Why is that lower? And then we're reducing our budget, obviously, for the 8-month, but if you can explain why the 120 is coming in significantly lower than the 198?
Line item, Kevin?
Yeah, line item 321.03.
On page 8.
Taxes, yeah, and it's about the second major paragraph down, or the second major area down.
And that's something that the city estimates for us. Marilyn can probably speak to that.
and Tom reminds me that these are dollars that are distributed from the state. So what we get, we show here. We thought we were going to get, in this case, 198,000. We're not getting that.
So is it a timing difference then, pretty much based on when they send the money in, or we just don't know that we're ever going to get it?
We just don't know that we're ever
Right.
going to get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was almost used to pay pensions last year, right? So you don't know if you're going to get it.
Okay. And, a couple other.
Yes, go ahead.
Also, too, just kind of going back to the point that some other aldermen have raised a little bit, could we just get a refresher, some information on the Gavin Library Fund, exactly what that's for, and any guidance as to the fund balance there? And then kind of the same type of a question on, and Gavin Fund is on page
190.
195. So do that one first, and I have another question.
Yeah,
after that.
Gavin Fund is a fund that was donated by someone in the community whose last name was Gavin, and she donated it with the restriction that it be spent on visual materials. So as you can see, it was at 265,000. We will be down to 123,000 in this fiscal year. So we've been taking money out of that fund and putting it into the DVD line, considering that visual education / entertainment.
And that seems appropriate. I was just kind of
Right.
wanting to have that out on the
Right.
public record so that people understand. And then the final question is, on the working cash fund on page 201, much like the city has a working cash fund, the library does too. Are there guidelines for fund balances? And if there are, could you share those?
Well, I think that just like the city, we're trying to accumulate a certain amount of funds to keep operating. We look at about a half a year's worth of funds, and our funds tend to be in different accounts. We have a capital replacement fund. That's a restricted fund. It can only be used to fund capital projects for the building. The working cash fund is a little bit different. Obviously, it's a little bit more liquid. It can be spent on different things than just capital projects. Marilyn and Tom and I are going to meet about some of our funds and our fund balances right after this budget cycle. This working cash fund, as I understand it, is not a traditional working cash fund where I don't have to pay money back to it with interest if I use money from it. But it is different than the capital replacement fund in that it can be used for anything, not just capital projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Well, Alderman Mulner.
No, it's Morley.
Oh, Morley. I'm sorry.
I do have a question, and just a little bit of a clarification, maybe give you also a little opportunity to brag. Thank you very much for being here. I know that last year, I recall, the city council, I wouldn't say gave you a hard time, but focused on the overtime line quite a bit. And I think we came away with that. We understood your explanation, and I think our response to your explanation was, we'd like you to take a closer look at that. And you seem to have taken a very close look at it, because it went all the way down to 0. And I appreciate your hard work and attention to that. I do have a question as it relates to that, and I think you answered it, but I want to make sure. On page, this is just for reference, but on page 26 of this budget, we get a summary of all personnel, the number of people. And in 11-12, the actual staff was 28 for the full-time was 28 for the library, and the and we're at 30 now. And you talked about adding 2 IT staff. Can you just give a little more detail about the staff that you have added since that time, and also how you address the overtime line item?
First of all, the IT staff, we were outsourcing all of our IT. The money for that was in the professional services line. That outsourcing was $100,000 worth of outsourcing a year. We weren't happy with the quality of service we were getting. Obviously, having someone in-house and someone who's actually really looking at our interests was what we wanted. So we actually stole someone from the city who has turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful employee so far. He's only been there about 2 months now, but he's doing beautifully. We really are enjoying having him on staff. So we took money out of that professional services line and transferred it into the full-time IT line. At that point, we only had planned to hire one person, one full-time person. And we had interviews, and we actually had some great interviews. And we had another internal candidate who was part-time on staff, 20 hours a week. We took more money out of that professional services line and transferred it into the full-time salary line and made him full-time. So now we have 2 full-time IT staff, and we're extremely happy. So basically, the $100,000 was transferred over, actually less than that. We still left some money in professional services line for outsourcing some IT if it's necessary, if we have big projects going on or something like that. So that's where that came from. Those are those 2 extra positions, and I think it's really to the benefit of the library and to the patrons. It's been working out beautifully so far. I'm no longer paying someone to come a half a day, not knowing where they are or kind of what they're doing. So it's great. And he's really fully invested in Elmhurst, so it's wonderful. The overtime line turned out to be sort of an interesting issue because as we got looking at it, we had some other developments that happened along with that. Basically, we had some issues with IMRF. We weren't counting Sundays as part of a regular work week, which meant that people were working their hours and then working extra hours on Sunday. That was bumping some people really close, if not over, the IMRF cap, exactly. So in order to get into compliance or to come into compliance with IMRF, we had to increase certain people's hours anyway. And at that point, it just worked out that it was much better to end overtime, be able to give a couple people on staff some more hours who were kind of already working those hours anyway, but working them as sort of overtime hours. So what we did is we gave some people 20 hours, some employees who were really great employees, gave them a little bit more investment in the organization, and they went into IMRF. And the overtime ended, and it just worked out very well. I have not heard anything else about it. And as I said, we do believe firmly, and we know that overtime, and basically it was kind of premium pay, sort of to put it, lack of a better word, it's sort of old school. And especially in an entity that is open 7 days a week, and Sunday is our busiest day. It's a hugely popular day with the patrons, so it's certainly nothing we would ever not consider doing. In fact, who knows what's going to happen in the future? It might be something we expand someday. So paying overtime just really wasn't a part of our, I know I shouldn't have said that. Paying overtime really wasn't a part of what fit with the organization anymore. It came from kind of an old place in the library world.
Thank you for your hard work.
Welcome.
My apologies to Alderman Morley for mislabeling you. I think my red-eye flight is catching up with me. All right. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Bram.
To follow up on Alderman Morley's comment, in regards to the IT staff, I was wondering if the library considered, I understand you, I don't want to use the word stole, but adopted,
No, I shouldn't use that word. Sorry.
Adopted one of the former city employees. Has there been any discussion before moving in that direction of sharing resources? We talk about, working intergovernmentally with the school district and the park district, and hopefully the library as well. Did those discussions take place, and how come we didn't pursue that avenue in regards to increasing the IT staff at the city to also cover the library, and maybe you could have gotten away with one resource compared to two? Is that something that was worthwhile to discuss at all?
And I think our two entities are really, really very different as far as their IT needs go. The library has all kinds of different sides to its IT. There's the public side where we have people in using computers, there's meeting room, audiovisual, and we're only going to be increasing all of that. We're looking at adding media labs, which is all kinds of high quality AV and technology. Then we have our whole card catalog system, which is automated, which is a whole other area within itself. Then there's our staff computers, and there's our security systems, and there's our cameras, and so it's just a huge amount of stuff. And we do some things together. The city comes in and helps us with some of the security stuff. They do some backup tapes for us as far as that stuff goes. Now it's actually turned out to be kind of it has turned out to be a great thing, because we do have someone from the city who, I'm sorry I said I stole, but we have him over now. And what's really nice is that he has a close relationship with Mike Stinson from the city. So we are actually collaborating and partnering even more than we ever used to. Not that it wasn't there, just that the city was busy, we had our own thing going. So I think it's actually going to turn out to be something where we will be working together even more, and Neil can call over. He's already gotten ideas from the fire department for some Mondo boards that they're all excited about that we may get, and we were going to go over there and see that technology. So it's just a nice little way that we are cooperating even more. So I think we definitely needed a full-time staff member at the library and 2 full-time staff members with all the technology we have and with the way that technology is going. We're just going to be increasing it. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Alderman York?
Thank you. I forgot about another thing I wanted to ask a question on. Page 192, line item 452-30-04, the automated circulation system. Would you be able to kind of give just a real brief explanation of where we were in this year's budget of about $66,000? Obviously, we're making some type of a capital investment or some type of an investment in the short year, and then we move forward at a little bit of a reduced rate. Can you kind of take us through that timeline, and then can you also explain, going out, what advantages are there to the new system?
Yep. This is something we've been working on for a while. The board did just vote to leave the SWAN consortium. SWAN is capital S-W-A-N and system-wide automated network. Okay? It is a consortium of 80, I'm not sure, 88 libraries 88 libraries, all scattered throughout. We're actually the furthest north and one of the largest libraries in the grouping. And then a whole bunch of libraries going as far south as like Flossmoor, Homewood Flossmoor area. East of us here, we've got Hillside and stuff, but it is just huge. It's 88 libraries. And we had been sharing a catalog system with them. So when you looked up your items from our library, you could search Elmhurst only, or you could search all these 88 other libraries. Now, the problem that we saw with it was that Elmhurst was this big, and all these other libraries were about this big. So we were sending out about 8,000 items a month to other libraries. And a lot of the items were things that then in turn, I'm bringing in about 6,000 items a month. So there was a disparity there of what we're sending out and what we're bringing in. And also, I could be requesting a Danielle Steele book for one of my patrons, I know, but we could be, and we could actually have it, but it could be checked out by someone in Broadmoor, so I'm going to get Blue Island's copy up here. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me, the dynamics of trading these materials all over the place. So we started to explore this. It was also much more expensive than it would have been to be a standalone. We were kind of supplementing other libraries. So we explored this for almost a half a year here, deciding what we'd like to do. A lot of libraries were in these huge consortiums, and you're seeing them coming out of these consortiums. Consortiums are unwieldy. In order to get anything done with our catalog, 88 libraries have to agree to it. To buy any new product for our catalog, 88 libraries have to agree to it. We are lucky to have a decent budget at Elmhurst, but there's a lot of these little tiny libraries out there that don't. So some of the upgrades and the products that we wanted for our patrons, we couldn't get because they can't afford it. Or we were paying kind of a larger portion of it. Also, as I said, we're this big, they're this big, and still we only had one vote in the consortium. Your consortium vote is not based on your size or how much you're actually putting into the consortium. So it was sort of an unfair relationship. The board voted to leave the consortium. We just voted on this last month. We will be purchasing a standalone catalog system. We're actually staying with the same system we have. We're just upgrading it because we're about 3 or 4 versions behind right now. It's very, very slow because it has to search through all these other libraries to pull up, a very popular book. So we'll be upgrading to a new system. That's your $160,000 that's built in here. We're also going to be joining a partnership. And this partnership is, I think it's 7 libraries in this area, or in the Chicagoland area. And we'll be drawing on collections that if we don't own something and one of our patrons wants something, they can search one of these partner libraries and they can get the item from these libraries. We won't be trading back items that we actually already own, though. Patrons will be waiting for that. But these other libraries that are in this partnership are libraries like Skokie Library, Naperville Library, Arlington Heights Library, Gilborden Library, which in Elgin. They're huge. They have vast collections that will greatly enhance our collection. For instance, we don't carry a lot of foreign language here because we just don't have the community that needs certain languages. We don't carry all of them. Well, you've got a library like Skokie. They have all of that. So we wouldn't necessarily buy that. We'll be able to borrow that. But a lot of these things won't be going back and forth anymore. Libraries that are in this partnership that we'll be joining are actually loaning out about 8,000 items a year. We're at 8,000 items a month. So huge difference in what we'll be trafficking back and forth between these libraries. But our patrons are going to have access to just these great collections, not little collections anymore, where we're going to be the big guy who's supplying everybody else. It'll give us access to these really great collections. So we think it's a great new upgrade to customer service for our patrons, for sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Alderman Gutenkopf?
What will this do to your circulation numbers? Do your circulation numbers as reported now reflect those 8,000 items a month that are going out?
They do. And they'll be, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So we'll have more realistic sense of what's circulating within Elmhurst, or? Mm-hmm.
It will for sure. And definitely our circulation might drop a little bit. It's not, overall we're circling about 1.5 million. So you can see it's still not a huge number. And our circle drop a little bit, but I'm also kind of confident that we don't know exactly how much our patrons aren't checking out because it's not here either. You know, I don't know. We're always trying to get, when we get new books in that are really, really popular, Gone Girl, for instance, I don't know if anyone read it, but extremely popular, we have to keep protecting that as a new item well into like a year of popularity when it shouldn't be new anymore, because if I let it go into new, it's just gonna be gone. I'll have 60 or 80 copies here for our patrons that will be out at all these other libraries. So we'll see. I'm sure it's gonna drop a little bit. I'm not that concerned about how much. And I am going to get a better picture of what our community is really looking for, which I think is great.
And so that will help you really predict what kinds of materials you want to supply in our community, which will help identify what you want to add to the collection better.
Right, exactly. And actually, the other big portion of being a standalone library is that patrons actually help really curate the collection. Right now, you don't ever suggest a purchase, or you might occasionally. You're just going to go out to any of these other libraries and just pull in a book. Big thing about being a standalone library is we'll have in our catalog, if you can't find it in our catalog, suggest a purchase, check our partner libraries, or you can check this greater catalog. Well, suggest a purchase is really important because there's certain things out there that we miss. There's, you know, millions and millions of books, so we don't get every single thing, or we miss something. So if you see something out there, you can just fill this suggest a purchase out. It goes on hold for you immediately. We get it in, and we get it out to you. It might be here within 2 weeks. You know, between ordering it, getting it in, processing, it might even be here in less time than that. So those requests will be met very, very quickly, and you'll get that item. And also, it helps us to see more what our community is looking for, because now our community, we don't get that suggest a purchase, they just get it from another library. Now we'll know more if there's holes in our collection, or if there is some, let's say there is a language collection that we haven't been carrying that our community wants. We'll be able to see that.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of more of a personal question. Are you tracking any of the downloads for these books that people now put on Kindles and everything? I don't know where, I can't actually
I didn't
find
bring
it in
that
here.
statistic with me. We have a line here, which is called digital content, which includes all of our
what I was talking about.
databases, right, our ebook resources. We just got a new downloadable magazine resource, which you haven't tried it. It's great. It's called Zinio. 1,144 electronic magazines checked out last month. It's a brand new product, so that's pretty good. Ebooks increase about 300% each month over the month before that. Still a small portion of our overall circulation, though.
So their increase to 242,000, line item 452,
Right.
36, is basically taking care of the licensing for that?
What it does is, actually with ebooks, you have to buy each ebook, and you can only loan it out to one person. So you buy one ebook, you loan it to one person, you get it back. It's just like a regular book. And that's a big deal with publishers. A lot of publishers were dragging their feet on selling ebooks to libraries because they don't want libraries to be in this market. So they're starting to come around, but that whole protecting of digital rights where I can't buy one book and then loan it out to 60 or 80 people is very important to, obviously, their livelihood. So it's one book per, we have to buy each book. The rights to the databases, though, Morningstar or some of the other Reference USA, those we pay a subscription price per year. So I think that's what you're asking, right?
It is. I just wanted to see if more people could have access to that single book. So,
No.
because a lot of times it's a kind of first come, first serve, and then
Yep.
you're in line.
Yeah.
Could you buy more books? I mean,
We
could you
can.
buy-
Problem is, there's not that much out there. I got to tell you, we've been buying as much as we can. It's just that the publishers aren't releasing all their books to libraries. We did just purchase a new product, though, the 3M Cloud. Are you familiar with that?
Very.
Because that's only for Elmhurst residents. The other overdrive that we're in is a consortium.
Okay.
The 3M Cloud is only for Elmhurst residents, and we're trying to purchase as much as we can there. It just doesn't exist, believe it or not. So,
It'd be interesting if we could track, maybe this is more of a side topic, but just the increase in
Oh, yeah.
subscribership, if we could be kind of kept in the
yeah.
abreast of that.
It's in our board packets each month, but I can definitely send that over.
Or I could join the library board, I suppose, huh?
Sure. Right. Just come on and I'll give you the statistics.
Thank you.
Alderman York?
Thank you again. Sorry, I keep coming up with questions, but Mary Beth, you refer to community when you're talking about things. Can you clarify what is the community people who live in Elmhurst, or is the community anybody who stops by?
I consider our primary community the community who lives in Elmhurst. That is the community we are serving first and foremost. The library is a public building, so anybody can come into it. Any of the hours were open, and we certainly don't card people when they come in the door. However, I will tell you that most of our usage is our community, and that is who we are focused on serving. And it is true that our patrons can go elsewhere too and use their cards at neighboring libraries. It's just that there's nothing as good as Elmhurst. So, right.
Okay, other questions on the library? Thank you very much for your time and for giving us the information. City Manager, I think we have the museum board here, so I would think that maybe we should proceed, and if it's okay with the council, and at least get through that? Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
They all are.
Page is this on? Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we have Brian Berghager and Gene Evans.
Good evening. As you know, the Historical Museum stands apart from other departments in that it has a separate nonprofit organization that puts in many long hours and much effort to improve that function of the city. And president of that organization is Gene Evans. He's here this evening to join me in presenting the museum's budget proposal to you. So Gene will speak first, and then I'll address some of those issues related specifically to the museum's budget.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, City Council, Mayor Levin, City Manager Grabowski, and City staff. As Brian mentioned, I'm Gene Evans, President of the Board of Directors of the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation. Our board is made up of to 21 members of the community who are all volunteers and distinguished members of Elmhurst and the community. We have several of them here tonight. I'd like to please allow your recognition, to have them stand up and thank them for the work that they do.
Please. Do you want to introduce them?
I will.
I put
First
him on the
is
spot.
John DeVries, Kathy Siegert, Kathy Jordan, Cheryl Kopecki, and Ellen Braun. Thank you. Thank you all. The foundation's mission is to support the museum, Churchville Schoolhouse, local history through advocacy, education, and fundraising support. More than 200 memberships, private memberships have been developed. These include individuals, families, and corporations. These are folks who want to ally themselves with our mission, and we're in our second year. We've grown every year. Members come from several local communities, and we even have members from out of state. We have contributed this year more than $60,000 in direct support to the City Museum for exhibits and public programs, including providing support for all Elmhurst grade school children visiting and studying at the Churchville Schoolhouse. We've secured several business sponsors for projects, including Suburban Bank and Trust, Inland Bank and Trust, Classic Cinema, and others. We've created alliances with several restaurants and bakeries in town and planned and conducted exhibit preview receptions at the museum that allow our program attendees to sample these products that encourage patronage of these businesses. We all know Shop in Elmhurst is a directive for all of us. Carried out an integrated development plan that includes an annual fund, sponsorship, planned giving, and bequests. We're also making, very soon we'll be announcing a major capital campaign for a new exhibit about Elmhurst history. More details will be coming for that, but please, I want you to mark your calendars for November 2nd of 2013 this year. The Elmhurst Heritage Foundation will hold a gala to benefit a brand new major exhibit about Elmhurst history that will open in 2014. And some of the highlights of that Brian will talk about in a budgetary sense. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Gene. Well, in addition to the members of the board who are here this evening, I'd also like to introduce a staff member from the museum. Lance Tauser, our curator of exhibits, is here. Lance, would you stand? the last standing here tonight. Nancy Wilson, our curator of collections, was here earlier. It was necessary for her to leave a little bit ago, so she's not here at this time. But Lance and Nancy are the two other full-time staff members at the Historical Museum and contribute greatly to the successes and accomplishments that have taken place there in the past few years. I appreciate the opportunity to present the museum's budget proposal. We're looking forward to making progress towards some very important goals in 2013, and this budget will provide the necessary resources for some of those projects that must be completed and for our goals to be met in 2013. I'll review the budget proposal highlights, but before I move on to that, I want to thank the city for its support of the museum's work to make Elmhurst a better place for our residents, for our businesses, and for our property owners. I actually know that Elmhurst is a better place because of the museum. And I know, speaking for the board of directors of the Heritage Foundation, we do appreciate the help from City Council. The museum's impact was broad and deep during the past year. Public programs and exhibits at the museum provided quality cultural experiences for our residents here in Elmhurst. For example, in 2012, the Illinois Association of Museums recognized those quality cultural experiences by presenting 2 awards to the Historical Museum for 2 previous exhibits. Those same exhibits and programs put Elmhurst on the map as a place where people from other communities in the area regularly visit for their quality cultural experiences. And strategic partnerships in the past year linked the museum with businesses, with schools, with other cultural organizations, and with a number of community groups. As an example, Suburban Bank and Trust was a sponsor of the Foundation's membership program. Inland Bank was a major sponsor for a school program that reached from the elementary level to York High School and actually to Elmhurst College. And Classic Cinemas, as Jean mentioned, was a lead sponsor of last fall's exhibit about American World's Fairs. Other partnerships were established with Elmhurst Park District, Elmhurst Public Library, Village of Bensonville, other museums in the area and in the United States, and many others. Another example of this broad and deep impact was several full-page stories in the Tribune and the Sun-Times and the Daily Herald that covered museum exhibits in particular. These stories also position the Elmhurst community as the type of community that's active, that's engaged, and accessible. As an example, I had the pleasure last fall to be in the gallery and speak with a couple who were visiting from Chicago for the first time. They were planning to move to the suburbs, and they were looking for a suburb to move to. This was their first visit to Elmhurst, and it was a Sunday afternoon, so they chose to drive around some of Elmhurst's neighborhoods, and then they chose 2 places to visit on their visit, the Elmhurst Historical Museum and the Elmhurst Art Museum. That was what they saw. That was their impression of Elmhurst, and that's what drew them to Elmhurst. That's anecdotal, it's a story, but we see it happening at the museum time and time again as we talk to our visitors and engage in their stories, their reasons for visiting the Historical Museum. Now, 2012 was a year filled with many, many accomplishments. Numbers describe some of those accomplishments that we had at the Historical Museum. Services were provided at the museum 7 days a week. Services and programs take place on weekdays, on weekends, on evenings. They take place on site at the Historical Museum. They take place at Churchville Schoolhouse. They take place in schoolrooms throughout the city and in other places throughout Elmhurst. As Jean mentioned, 18 board members served the Heritage Foundation, representing a broad base of the community from business to philanthropy and education. I thank Jean and all of the board members for their investment of time and trust over the past year. And almost 150 different donors gave the foundation's annual fund a resounding yes when they were asked to make a donation last year. And these donors are individuals, businesses, and organizations right here in town. The foundation also separately attracted more than 200 new and renewed memberships over the past year. And as you know, the foundation was a source of direct support last year for museum exhibits and programs for the public and for services for our schools. As Jean mentioned, that support was valued at over $60,000. The foundation truly stepped up its game plan in 2012, and I know that 2013 will be an even more successful year for both the foundation and the Historical Museum. The museum responded to 598 reference inquiries last year from throughout the United States, and we were able to assist these individuals because our collections contain valuable resources and information that oftentimes are not available elsewhere. 2,610 school children and scouts participated in museum programs that were presented in classrooms, at the museum, and at the schoolhouse. As an aside, we're already almost fully booked for school programs during the busy months of April and May this spring. 3,671 hours were devoted by volunteers at the museum who helped with exhibits, who processed collections, conducted research, staffed our museum store, helped with school programs, and assisted in many, many other ways. Placing a value on that would bring that figure to about $70,000. And then all told, 15,255 patrons received direct museum services in 2012. This includes our exhibit visitors, our school services, reference services, and individuals who participated in public programs. More information about all of these services during the past year is in the budget book on pages 86 through 87. The museum's 2012 annual report will be distributed very shortly, so I hope you look at that for additional elaboration about our services in 2012. The abbreviated year of 2013 will build on some of the accomplishments and the planning that took place in 2012. The museum's exhibit calendar for 2013 is truly top-notch. Some of you attended the Foundation's member donor preview reception for the On the Road to Glory exhibit that was held on January 31st, and you saw firsthand how the museum engaged with residents and visitors from not only Elmhurst, but from throughout the area. This summer, we'll move on to an exhibit of work by Paul Natkin, a rock and roll photographer who started in the 1970s here in Chicago by going to local shows and selling photographs to the Tribune and the Sun-Times. Soon he was selling to national music publications like Rolling Stone and Spin and Downbeat here in Elmhurst. I know that exhibit's going to be another blockbuster for us this summer. And this fall, we'll host a traveling exhibit about the Depression and World War II generations. The traveling exhibit will be supplemented with specially taped interviews of Elmhurst people sharing their Elmhurst experiences of those important times. And then finally, in November, we'll open an exhibit about Carl Sandburg's years here in Elmhurst. Sandburg lived in Elmhurst for 11 years and completed a number of his books while he was a resident here. The entire staff is also focused this year on development of a new exhibit about Elmhurst history that will open in 2014. This will be funded privately by gifts and donations to the foundation, and in the end, it will establish new stakeholders and new partners for the museum and for the Heritage Foundation. The foundation's gala event, as Jean mentioned, will take place at Drury Lane on November 2nd, and that will play a big role in our fundraising effort. In another direction, the museum is leading a process that will extend out our current strategic plan. Last week, I reported to the Public Affairs and Safety Committee about our plan to extend that strategic plan, and more information will be forthcoming later on this year about our progress and about the establishment of strategic goals and our strategies for achieving those goals. Now I'd like to review some of the budget figures in the proposal on pages 169 and 170 in the budget book. Starting at the top, the total for salaries and wages accounts for continued operations at the current staffing level at the museum. The budget provides for 3 full-time and 4 part-time positions. It does not account for any of the full-time or part-time positions that have been unfilled for the past 2 or 3 years. Moving down, account 3052, professional services, provides for our marketing and promotions at the Historical Museum. This includes such things as our printed calendar of events that's distributed quarterly, posters and flyers, banners, press kits, and so forth. Account 5001, building maintenance and repair, provides for continued repair and maintenance of the museum building, the education center, the schoolhouse, and the collection storage facility. But it also includes an additional $5,000 this year for improvement of grounds around the Historical Museum itself. Attention to this area has been deferred for several years, but as you may imagine, a visitor's first and last impression of a facility, of a visit to a facility, is made when he or she approaches that building and when they walk away from that building. And we can do better than we have been doing at the Historical Museum. Grounds work has been deferred, as I said, for several years, and shrubs and bushes and trees are dead or overgrown, and they're in dire need of replacement or removal. This project will, we believe, greatly improve the overall visitor experience at the museum. And account 6039 represents funds from the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation that are transferred to the city as a grant. And it shows a $50,000 increase to provide for development and design work during 2013 on the new exhibit about Elmhurst history. That exhibit project, although it will come to an end in 2014, is being conducted at this point right now and will continue to be conducted throughout the entire year of 2013. Earlier I mentioned that the foundation is committed to raising private funds for the cost of the exhibit, and this $50,000 during 2013 accounts for some of the early content development and early design work that's required. The other $23,500 that makes up the total of $73,500 will be devoted to exhibits and public programs taking place at the Historical Museum. And then account 8023, building improvements, shows $183,000 for work later this year to improve HVAC in the museum building. Another $100,000 is shown in 2014, and that will supplement this project. So it's a 2-year project that we'll be conducting. The total, $283,000, is funded by a grant from the state of Illinois. It's a grant program to assist museums that are located on public property, like the Elmhurst Historical Museum. We're just finishing up a 2-year $50,000 grant through that same program, and that grant paid for a new roof on the education center a year ago, and it is also this year just finishing up payment for a new mechanical lift that provides access to the museum for visitors in wheelchairs and walkers. And that grant, that earlier grant, is shown as $22,000 in the account 8023 for fiscal year 2012-2013. So we're closing that one out. Well, I appreciate your support in the past year, and on behalf of the staff and the board of the Heritage Foundation, we look forward to working with other city staff as well as with city council members to continue our progress in 2013. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Brian, Jean, all the board members who are here late at night with the rest of us. Just a couple of comments and one question. I have been, in the past years, outspoken in regards to how much funds, how much money is spent on the Historical Museum. Over the past years, I have seen, and I've complimented yourself and your staff in the last 2-3 years on the great improvements that I have seen. So I want to publicly, once again, like I did last year, compliment you guys. Lance, I know you have been a big part of the improvement of the exhibits, and which results in a large draw of not only Elmhurst residents, but residents from all around Elmhurst. So thank you to you and the rest of the museum staff. So kudos is deserved, and I don't give out compliments very often, but obviously I'm very impressed with what has happened over the past few years. Excuse me. One of the things I wanted to touch on was the Historical Museum, and we've talked about it in committee, but I wanted to say it publicly in regards to the annex building or the education center that is next to it. I want to bring this up, publicly, because I don't think many residents, at least residents that I've spoke to about the museum, are aware of that and the function. If you can touch on that briefly, I would appreciate it, and then I'll get to my one and only question.
Sure. Well, thanks for the compliment. We do appreciate that. It means a lot to the staff, I know. The Education Center is the one-story brick office building due south of the Gloss Mansion. And for some of you who may not have been involved with the city and know its history, it was acquired by the city through an Illinois First grant probably about maybe 11 years ago or so. And our use of that building consists of devoting about 50% of it for public programming. It's at grade, so it's much easier to get into than the Gloss Mansion. And we were able to do some relatively minor changes in the building by removing some partitions and walls to open up some space to provide the space necessary for some of our public programs. The other 50% of the space is used for administrative staff and also a conference room. The total size of the building is just maybe over 4,000 square feet. Part of our strategic planning process will include looking at our facilities and determining how to most effectively develop those facilities as we go forward to meet the needs of our audiences here in Elmhurst.
Thank you. My one and only question, it's difficult to even find questions because Brian does an excellent job summarizing and highlighting all the items here, is actually, it is explained, but I'd like further explanation. It's explained on the J form on 171, and it's line item 8023, and it's the building improvements line item. And I know you just spoke to it, Brian, but my lack of understanding on this line item is how an HVAC system could cost $288,000 when we're not getting to it tonight, but the police HVAC improvements plus gutter work is, I think, $60-something thousand for that facility. So can you dive down on what extensive work are we doing here for a $283,000 HVAC improvement?
Mm-hmm. Well, the HVAC improvement continues improvements that have taken place in the Gloss Mansion over time to transform it from what was private living space into a public museum. It was not built as a public space. It certainly was not built as a museum. And over time, we've transformed it to serve its present use. And it is an old building. Our project is focused on a goal of providing reasonably comfortable environment for our visitors and for our collections. And in that type of building, there are some special needs given its construction. Also, we're trying to minimize the impact of the changes in the building so that we're not having exposed ductwork, for instance, but rather finding some innovative ways to provide heating and cooling to different areas of the museum. Currently, the museum is cooled by a series of window air conditioners, and there is a central unit for a portion of the second floor. So it's very inadequate in the summer. In the winter, there's no air movement in the building whatsoever except when the doors are open. So this will be a great addition, not only for our visitors, but also for the care of collections and the objects that are exhibited there. And the cost is associated with doing some of those innovative things to fit it within the confines of the building and to fit it within our special needs as a museum.
Okay, I don't really have anything to add to that. The dollar amount actually is a little bit overwhelming to me, but I'm sure that we'll get a great end product, so thank you.
Alderman Pezza, then Alderman Gudenkauf.
Thank you. I'd just like to say once again, for a town our size, we are so fortunate to have this gem as a piece of our community. I highly support it. I want to thank not only staff, volunteers, foundation, for their time and effort to make this gem, along with the schoolhouse, especially in the past few years, so visible and vibrant. More and more residents are saying, as new residents to Elmhurst, that the museum was actually an important piece in their decision-making of why they loved Elmhurst. So thank you, continue the great work, and I need to get over and see the ongoing exhibit. How long is it there until? Because I've heard great things about it.
On the Road is here through May 19th, and I would like to remind you that Bobby Allison will do a meet and greet at the museum on April 4th. Is that correct? 4th? April 4th, 5 to 7 p.m.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Alderman Gudenkauf, then Alderman Dunn.
Thank you. And yes, thank you for being here tonight. It's always a pleasure for me personally to hear how the museum is growing. I have a quick question about the consultant fees line. Would you remind us what that funds and how that's different from your professional services line?
Sure. Consultants is line 3012 on page 169, and that accounts for our fundraising consultant, Ken Bartels. 1/3 of that is funded by the Heritage Foundation. 2/3 is funded through the city. It's a partnership that was created when the museum's full-time development director position was not filled. So it provides important services to us. Mr. Bartels has assisted greatly in developing our plans for the capital campaign. He has assisted greatly in continuing to educate our board about the nature of development and fundraising. He has also assisted greatly in developing the board's sense of obligation to the financial welfare of the organization. We have 100% giving from our board members. We have 100% of our board members who are members of the organization. So he works actively with us several hours a month.
Alderman Dunn?
Yes, and I want to echo the gratitude for having such a excellent resource in town here. I know there's been talk off and on about potentially charging some admission fee, as some of the other museums in town do. What is the current viability of doing that? I've seen some questionnaires probing the public if that's something that they have a tolerance for. Is that a no-go, or is it something that may occur in the future?
Well, the museum is exploring all avenues for earned income. We've expanded and improved our museum shop. We've talked about the sponsorships. The museum admission has come up. It was debated strongly during our earlier strategic planning process, and it then, at that point, was included in the plan as something to be looked at to possibly consider charging for temporary exhibits at the Historical Museum. We have not pursued it at this time. It's something that will be looked at again in the strategic plan. Perhaps surprisingly to a lot of people, there are some museums in major cities, major museums, that have backed off their admissions, and they are now either reducing or eliminating admission fees entirely, and putting more of a focus on giving by visitors and memberships. So it's a different strategy that has worked in some communities. We've been building our capacity here. We've been trying to build our donor base, our member base, over the past few years. It's been our strategy. So we've tried to embrace everyone despite their financial situation. We do have program fees for some of our programs. But we do not charge a fee to walk into the public gallery at this time. We'll be looking at that as part of our planning process.
Alderman Plumsky?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I also agree with all that's been said about how fantastic our museum is, and thank you all for being here tonight. My question is about professional services, line item 3052. And as you mentioned, the museum is a draw to bring people here, and I think it truly does bring them to town, and they want to eat at our restaurants and shop at our stores too. And I'm curious, does this allocation of about $20,000 a year, does that handle all the targeted exhibits, or do you look to, I know we're not addressing it tonight, visitor and tourism, or do you look to visitor and tourism just for generally to bring people to the area? Like, do you have specific campaigns that, does everything fall underneath the professional services, or is it handled elsewhere too?
Everything for the museum promotion and marketing and branding falls under the 3052 professional services.
Okay.
That doesn't include the visitor tourism effort or any economic development effort of the city. We certainly view the Historical Museum's marketing and communications as an important part of the city's marketing, but it doesn't provide for any of the costs of visitor tourism.
So if you, let's say for Toys in the Hood, if there's anything specific to that exhibit that only was funded through here, something wasn't mentioned, I guess I'll ask them later, but you look for your advertising dollars right here, and that's it. Is that correct? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how some of the interrelationships between different departments, and I know we're not talking about visitor and tourism tonight. I'm just wondering if the museum looks to this budget line item to promote their specific exhibits, or do they ever say, well, we know the museum's going to be spending this much allocated to us, let's put that with what visitor and tourism is doing? And Marilyn, maybe you can answer that better, or I could just wait until we had that separate conversation.
I'll attempt to answer that. And what I asked,
I can't formulate. I apologize.
I think I understand where you're headed with it. What I whispered to Brian was also to touch on one of his part-time employees, Patrice, who does all of the marketing for the museum. So I wouldn't say that everything comes out of the professional services, because in the part-time portion are her wages. Now, with that, Marlene Tegmeyer, who is visitor and tourism, also promotes the museum at the Visitors and Tourism Bureau for the county. So it's a combined effort.
Okay.
I would say. I think that's what your question was.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I'll just have more with the next meeting. Thank you.
I was going to add that one of the opportunities I believe that we have here in Elmhurst is to better market the cultural organizations as a critical mass. as opposed to marketing each one individually. And I've met with some of the other museum directors here in town, and we're pursuing that idea with the Art Museum and the Theater Historical Society in particular. And I know it's also come up in the visitor tourism meetings. I think the critical mass of museums, certainly, but partnered with the other cultural and educational and artistic organizations here in Elmhurst, sets Elmhurst aside as a community from many, many other communities. And it has the potential to be an even greater draw, doing more together than we do individually, that type of approach.
All right, I think...
One quick question.
Oh, you want to ask a question?
Yes, please.
All right,
Thank
Alderman
you, Mr.
Kennedy.
Mayor. Brian, one quick question related to the one-room schoolhouse. I think you mentioned there were 2,610 total school-age visitors, or some number close to that. Do you have a feeling for how many visitors of those students were at the one-room schoolhouse versus the museum itself?
I do have that number.
Or do you have a feel for how many groups? You know, just trying to get an idea of usage and...
Last year, the school services tracked the way that we expected them to track, which was a lot of school classes which had traditionally visited the historical museum went to the schoolhouse for their field trip. And yet we also got a number of schools to the museum for the first time through that. I can get those specific numbers because we do track how many of those are schoolhouse versus how many in class versus how many at the museum.
I think it'd be good to know, you know, of school-age kids in Elmhurst and Bensonville, how many are going year over year, and are we able to attract, you know, groups from outside of the area to use it, and just, you know, are we advertising properly? Are we getting the benefit from that resource that's there?
Well, we have an opportunity to truly grow the visitor base for the schoolhouse with schools throughout the area. Last year, we attempted to do that working with the regional superintendent of schools, and we weren't as successful as we had hoped. We didn't make as much progress as I had hoped. We're looking at ways to do that this year. Obviously, in April and May, we have prime field trip days for schools, and we fill up. We found that we have more schools than we can handle at that time of the year. So we're trying to push some of those field trips into other parts of the year at the schoolhouse, and to then also continue to bring in schools from throughout DuPage County.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for coming out, and I want to thank the board. I know you guys work hard on your projects all year, and thank you for staying late on a late night. I don't think we're going into anything else tonight, so fill up your snow blowers and dust off your mucklucks because it'll be snowing tomorrow. Anything else for Committee of the Whole? City Manager?
I just want to point out that in the packet that was sent out, two items that were requested at the last meeting, the fiscal year, the 2014 budget and tax levy schedule was in your packet, and also the savings estimate for the reduction in 6 full-time positions was in there as well. And just say thank you for your patience and stamina tonight. I know it's late.
Thank you to the City Council. If nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Alderman Wagner and Alderman York. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all.